Evening guys, tonight we're going to jump into the fundamental theorem of strength training. But before we do that, please be sure to like and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the videos. And also, if you haven't done so already, be sure to download your guide to make sure that you can master the small things to the highest standard consistently. So, without further ado, we are going to get into probably the most important subject that we will ever cover when it comes to strength development and building muscle. And you hear me bang my teeth together all the time about this idea of understanding this unique and beautiful relationship that exists between stress and recovery. And tonight we're going to master this idea so that you will be able to go forth and, well, never be bullshitted again by a single social media influencer, by a coach, by a trainer, by anyone. You will have the entire theory, the fundamental theorem of how to build strength. There is no going back after this video. Once you've watched this, life will never be the same again. You will have every single piece of knowledge you need, whether you realize it or not, in order to be successful at what you've set out to do in the world of strength training. So, what am I talking about? Well, let's use an idea. Let's use the premise of steroid use in sports, because I think it offers the best example possible to simplify the understanding of what happens at a physiological level when we are attempting to build strength. So, in order to build strength, what we must do is allow the human physiology to take upon an anabolic role. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, right? So let's just lay that out and let's make a firm understanding of that. So your metabolism exists on a continuum with anabolism at one end and catabolism at the other. What I would definitely state at this point and would urge you all to do is just to pop down to a local community college and take either a general chemistry class or a biology class, or in best cases both. Once you've taken these classes, you will have a great understanding of what exists in the human body with regards to your physiology and how it works. When you understand how it works, you will not be, no one can take advantage of you again, right? When you understand how the human metabolism works, you understand how the entire body works. When you've mastered the understanding of the endocrine system, which is what governs your body's hormones, which is also responsible for your metabolism. I highly recommend doing that if you have the ability to, just so you can back up your knowledge 100%. So back to the idea of the continuum itself, right? We have anabolism and catabolism. When your body is anabolic, when your body is anabolic, you are taking energy in, right, through your digestion, and you're able to store it. Okay? You are able to store it so that your body can either store it for energy later on, also, it can be used in the natural physiological processes that need to occur in your body so that you can sustain life. Some of those things include the rebuilding of damage that's occurred in the body, the strengthening of bones, the catalyzing certain chemical processes that occur in the body so that you can just blink your eyes, so that you can swallow, so that you can sleep at nighttime, so that you can be hormonally balanced. Lots of different things that just happen without you having to think of these. Hundreds, thousands of chemical processes that are happening every second in your body so that you can just exist. It's a miracle when we really break it down and think about it. And thank God that we don't actually have to consciously work these things. Otherwise, we'd all be in a lot of trouble, right? But that is the anabolic side of the metabolism, right? It is the ability to take on energy, to consume it, and allow your body to do what it wishes with, right? So to either store it or to use it in chemical processes within the body, okay? The opposite end of the continuum is the catabolic realm, or catabolism, right? Which is the ability to break down stored energy in your body so that you can carry out once more chemical processes or a necessary physiological act. So a great example of this is if you went out for a walk and you bumped into a saber-toothed tiger. You would be very grateful for the catabolic end of your metabolism, because the introduction of cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream will allow you to take stored energy into kinetic energy, or so you can turn it into kinetic energy and act. You're either going to fight or you're going to flight, right? Either way, you need a reliable source of fuel so that you can act instinctively. That is the best example I can give of the catabolic side of the metabolism, okay? Now then, how do we utilize these when it comes to strength training? Well, this is the fundamental understanding of strength training, is understanding what both of these mean and how you utilize them well. So let's go back to the drug using example. A drug user, someone who's using anabolic steroids. So the word anabolic doesn't just exist within the realm of drugs or steroids. It's a physiological term. It's a very common term. You'll hear it used in a chemistry class. You'll hear it used in a biology class. It is not just exclusive to drug use. So anabolic steroids allow someone who's using these drugs to stay anabolic. Okay? Why would you want to do that? Well, remember the term anabolic is taking energy in and rebuilding, right? You're able to store or rebuild broken things in the body, or to strengthen things in the body. Well, why is that handy? Well, if you're strength training, there is a small amount of damage that occurs. You're adding stress to the body, right? So if you're a drug user and you can hack your own physiology so that you are anabolic every single minute, every hour of every day, well, you don't have to worry, first of all, about triggering it. You're already anabolic. And now what you can do is train in a very unique way, which means that you can break down body parts and absolutely destroy them. So you could go into the gym on one day and do nothing but chest exercises for an hour. The next day you could go in and do nothing but back exercises for an hour. The day after you could go in and do nothing but legs exercises for an hour, and so on and so forth. And you wouldn't even need a rest day necessarily. You could just keep going and going and going because your body is anabolic. It's always going to rebuild itself. So that's where this methodology came in. And around about the 50s when it was being experimented with, and then into the 60s was when the training template really landed, which is the ability to break down body parts and train them individually. So you would take your chest, for example, and you will do nothing but chest exercises, and some pretty interesting ones. You can do all your flies and cables and work all these different angles and just rip literally the muscle to pieces. You're going to damage it while simultaneously driving blood to it to get these things called pumps, which is what the drug users need. They need to be simultaneously breaking down muscle whilst driving nutrients to the muscles themselves. Okay, so that's why things like certain pre-workout supplements are very important for them. That's why taking creatine is incredibly important. And of course, the drugs themselves. When you combine all this together with this training methodology of picking maybe 4 or 5 exercises per body part and just absolutely going for it, you're going to get extremely good results. Okay, because again, your body is anabolic. There's nothing you can do that's going to deter it from that. You're using drugs, you're staying anabolic all of the time. You can destroy yourself, you're not going to overtrain, and you're going to get the results that you want. Now then, what happens if you're not using drugs? How on earth do we get ourselves into the anabolic realm? Well, we do this through a couple of exercises. And those exercises are the ones that allow us to place the greatest stress on our physiology. We need to step into the catabolic realm short term. It's an investment so that we can step out into the anabolic realm, which follows it after. So remember the analogy I gave earlier about going out for a walk and bumping into a saber-toothed tiger. Well, that is what the gym session is for us. Right? We get warmed up, and then the equivalent of fight or flight or seeing that saber-toothed tiger comes in the form of a couple of exercises. We get a lot out of the squat and the deadlift, and we also get a lot out of the flat and the incline bench press. That's sort of like a continual. But the two big A-listers are your squat and deadlift. They are the equivalent for us as non-drug users. That is the closest thing that we're going to get to triggering an anabolic response. Now, we don't get to stay there for every minute of hour of every day. We've got to be really careful about what we do. So we need to trigger First of all, let's say it this way. We need to invest by stepping into this catabolic realm. Because remember, when we're training, we're not anabolic, we're catabolic. We're breaking down stored energy for the physical practices of what we're doing. The kineticness, the energy of movement through the biomechanics, right? That is what is happening when we're training. So if you were to try and train like a drug user without using drugs, what's going to happen is you're going to overtrain. You're going to be catabolic for too long. You're going to be catabolic every single day, and you will be preventing that anabolic flow that we want after the training session. So here's what we do. We invest in 75 minutes, let's say, if it takes you that long to get through your training session, in the catabolic realm. And then we size up those 5 major health principles. On completion of the training session, we eat the right foods, we stay hydrated, we manage our stress levels, we get the right amount of sleep, and we do our recovery work in between, right? If we master those 5 things, we are then able to enhance. Once the pendulum is swung to catabolic short term, it swings to the other realm, and the anabolic realm, to balance out. And we keep it there for as long as possible by mastering those 5 major things. Now, as time goes on and we become more well-versed and practiced in this, what happens is we can extend that anabolic realm, if we're lucky, out to about 48 hours. If we're really, really lucky, right? Now, what happens at the 48-hour mark when we stop being anabolic? It doesn't work anymore. We're not using drugs. We can't just stay anabolic. What do? We land another training session. Okay, and then we do through the same process again. And when it wears off in 48 hours, boom, you land your next training session. So for us, the equivalent of using an anabolic steroid is the training session itself. This is also why drug users don't need to use exercises like squats and deadlifts. It might not be worth the risk for them when they're already anabolic. And if they want to grow large legs, for example, they can just jump on some leg extension machines. They can use hamstring curls. They could use leg presses, and they're done. They don't need to do any more. They could just do 10, 15, 20 sets if they wanted to, of just destroying those muscles without having to go anywhere near the high-risk exercises like squats and deadlifts. You speak to people or listen to people like Dorian Yates, right? An incredible Mr. Olympia. Look at his training. He didn't squat once. Not once. It wasn't worth his time. It wasn't worth the risk. And the same with traditional deadlifts. He used Romanian deadlifts, but he didn't use traditional deadlifts. It wasn't worth the risk. It wasn't part of his regular training routine. He doesn't need to. He's already anabolic from the drugs that he was using. Okay? Is this starting to make sense? So for us as non-drug users, the equivalent to using drugs, the equivalent to, or the tool necessary to get that anabolic state of metabolism is through the exercise itself. But if we overtrain, if we do exercise every single day to that high degree, we don't stimulate the anabolic response. Or we would put our body in a state of too much catabolicness, right? Or catabolism, so that we would no longer be able to function in that anabolic realm because they suppress one another, right? This is also why we don't get away with using exercises like cables and flies and dumbbells. They're just not going to trigger that response, guys. As natural athletes, we're not going to get to our destination using this methodology. Does that make sense now? If you go into the gym and you just start doing flies and you just start lifting using a Smith's machine and maybe some push-ups and maybe even dips on that day, it's not going to trigger the anabolic response. All you're going to do is push cortisol and adrenaline around your body. That's all you're going to do. You're not going to develop sufficient strength that way. Whereas if you go into the gym and you land either a squat or a deadlift first and trigger the anabolic response, and then just layer in some bench pressing, some heavy dips, some weighted dips, some wide pull-ups and a bent over row, the Pendlay row, and follow it up with some sit-ups, you've covered the entire body from start to finish. The entire thing, right? But we have to change our way of thinking. We have to look at this a completely different way to what we've looked at it before, because it's not like how the picture is painted for you, right? It's not like how the other social media influencers are trying to get you to train by having an arm day and having a leg day and a shoulder day. that is not going to work for you if you're not using drugs. If you're using drugs, knock yourself out. It's an effective strategy and you will get absolutely fucking massive and strong. If you're not using drugs, it will not work for you. It will not serve you. Some of these coaches and trainers will tell you the reason you're not progressing is because you're not working hard enough, you're not consistent enough, you're not going to failure enough, or whatever horse shit they come up with. It's just not going to work, guys. And it's time for this shit to end. It needs to end. This was introduced in the 50s and 60s. And unfortunately, no one has stood up and made up like a public, real distinguish between these methods. Whereas in the 40s, this was just the way, this was common way that you built strength, was with full body training. Look at individuals like Leroy Colbert that really brought this to light and tried his best in his lifetime to bring this information to the forefront of people, but he was not able to penetrate through the noise and, to be honest, probably the colorfulness and the excitement of drug using training, because it's fun. I understand it. The ability to go in and just do nothing but chest exercises, so your chest is swollen at the time and you feel good, right? But then later that evening when it wears off, and the only time that you can actually look like that is when you have a pump. So you've got these guys before they're going out to the nightclubs doing their push-ups on the floor to try and short-term make their chest look bigger. But the reality is you're not that strong. You don't have that naturally, right? Whereas if you build yourself naturally and you understand how training works, you don't have to do push-ups before you go on a date. You don't have to do arm exercises before you go out for a night on the town or whatever it is that you're going to do, or to go and see and try and impress someone, or just to look a particular, like, you don't need to do that when you train naturally. The best thing you can do is actually just take 5 days off or a few days off, let your body recover, let it become stronger, and then you're at your biggest and your strongest after a rest period. Once you've gone through a few weeks of this, then you'll be at your absolute largest, strongest, and then you begin the cycle again, and it's just this beautiful and amazing process, and you understand the importance of rest. So if you want to be stronger, for many of you, rest more. Don't train as much. I'm not saying don't train hard or not to train smart. I'm saying figure out your plan, understand what you're doing at every single level, and don't let anyone tell you what you're doing is wrong. Figure it out yourself, understand the plan, understand the bigger picture, and then just go for it, guys. Hopefully this message finds the right people at the right time. And if there's anything more I can do, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me, send me a DM, reach out on Instagram or on YouTube or wherever it is that you want to, and I'll always do my best to get back to you. That's the light just going off because I haven't moved around as much. I'll use that as my time to get out of here, guys. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you all soon.